I never thought I'd be the villain in someone else's love story. But watching my best friend trap herself and her reluctant boyfriend in a loveless engagement while shopping for houses together has pushed me to the breaking point. I'm about to destroy a friendship to save 2 lives from a mistake that will take years to undo. And I'm terrified I might already be too late. I've always prided myself on being the friend who minds her own business. The one who listens without judgment, who offers advice only when asked directly. At 22, I've seen enough relationship drama to know that inserting yourself between 2 people rarely ends well for anyone involved. But there are moments in life when staying silent feels like its own kind of betrayal. My friend and I met during freshman orientation. I was a sophomore mentor, and she was this bright-eyed, optimistic freshman who seemed to light up every room she walked into. Despite our age difference, we clicked instantly. She had this infectious enthusiasm about life that made even mundane activities feel like adventures. We became inseparable, study buddies, weekend brunch partners, late-night confidantes. She's like the little sister I never had. When she started dating him in her sophomore year of college, I was genuinely happy for her. He seemed nice enough, quiet, a bit reserved compared to her boundless energy, but they balanced each other in a way that appeared healthy from the outside. The first few months were what you'd expect from any new relationship. The honeymoon phase where everything is perfect, and the future seems limitless. I told her everything. How he had confessed to feeling pressured into the proposal. How she had admitted to our mutual friend that fear of being alone was keeping her in the relationship. I described the patterns I observed, the fighting, the visible tension between them at gatherings. I mentioned specific incidents where one or both had seemed miserable in the other's presence. And now you're buying a house together, I finished. Which is one of the biggest financial commitments 2 people can make. If you're doing that to try to fix what's already broken, stop. She cut me off, her voice quivering with anger. Just stop. You have absolutely no right. None. I know this is hard to hear. No, you don't know anything. She stood up abruptly, wine sloshing dangerously in her glass. You've been single for what, 2 years now? And suddenly you're an expert on relationships? On my relationship? The personal attack stung, but I had anticipated it. This wasn't about me or my relationship history. I stayed calm, which only seemed to infuriate her more. He told me about your little conversation, she continued, her voice rising. How you cornered him when he was drunk and vulnerable. How you tried to plant doubts in his mind. This caught me off guard. I hadn't cornered anyone. He had volunteered his concerns. But of course, in retelling it to her, he would frame it differently. To do otherwise would mean admitting the truth of what he'd said. That's not what happened, I said quietly. But that's not even the point. The point is that you deserve someone who's with you because they can't imagine life without you. Not because they're afraid of disappointing you. And he deserves someone who loves him for who he is, not because being with anyone is better than being alone. You think I don't love him? She asked incredulously. You think I'm just using him as some... They posted cute pictures together. She gushed about him constantly, and he seemed equally smitten. But around the 4-month mark, I started noticing small cracks in the foundation. Some placeholder. I think you love the idea of him, I said carefully. The idea of being engaged, of planning a wedding, of buying a house. But when it comes to the actual day-to-day reality of being with him specifically, you both seem miserable more often than not. She was shaking now, whether from rage or because my words had hit a nerve, I couldn't tell. You know what I think? She said, her voice dangerously low. I think you're jealous. I think you can't stand that I'm moving forward with my life while you're still figuring yours out. I think you want me to be alone because you are. The accusation was so far from the truth that it almost made me laugh, but the hurt behind it was real. In her mind, I wasn't trying to help. I was trying to sabotage her happiness out of my own insecurity. That's not true, I said firmly. If I thought you were genuinely happy, if I thought this relationship was healthy for both of you, I would be your biggest cheerleader. I would be helping you plan that wedding and pick out paint colors for the new house. But I can't support something that I believe is hurting you both. Well, thankfully, I don't need your support or your approval, she snapped, grabbing her purse. And I don't need friends who think so little of me that they believe I'd trap someone into marriage. "That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said," she shouted. "You think I'm so pathetic, so desperate to not be alone that I'm forcing someone to be with me. Do you have any idea how insulting that is?" I tried once more. "I'm just asking you to take a step back and really think about why you're rushing into these huge commitments. The engagement, the house. There's no hurry if this relationship is solid." She would cancel plans with me last minute because of some trivial argument they were having. Sometimes she'd show up to our coffee dates with red eyes, clearly having been crying. If it's meant to last, it will still be there in a year or two. "I'm done with this conversation," she said, heading for the door. "And honestly, I don't know if I can forgive this. Some things you can't take back." As she reached for the doorknob, I made one last, desperate attempt. "Just answer one question before you go. Are you truly, deeply happy with him? Not with the idea of being engaged or having a wedding, but with him, specifically, as the person you wake up to every day for the rest of your life?" She paused, her back to me, hand still on the doorknob. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, I saw her shoulders slump, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I had reached her. But then she straightened her spine, opened the door, and left without another word. I haven't heard from her since. It's been 3 days. Our mutual friends report that she's told them I betrayed her, that I tried to sabotage her relationship out of jealousy. Several have taken her side without even hearing mine. Others are staying neutral, sensing there's more to the story but unwilling to get involved. And just this morning, she posted on social media that they've made an offer on a house. A smiling photo of them holding a sold sign, her engagement ring prominently displayed. The caption read, "Can't wait to start our forever with the love of my life. New chapter forever home." His smile in the photo doesn't reach his eyes. It's been 2 weeks since our confrontation, and the silence between us grows more profound with each passing day. Her absence in my life feels like a physical wound, a dull, persistent ache that sharpens whenever I see her name pop up in group texts or when mutual friends carefully avoid mentioning her around me. The house offer was accepted. They're scheduled to close next month. The wedding date has been set for May, just after spring semester ends. When I gently ask what was wrong, she'd brush it off with practiced excuses. "We're just figuring things out, or all couples fight sometimes." I nodded and pretended to believe her, even though the frequency of these moments told a different story. Life is marching forward as if our friendship never existed, as if my concerns were merely an inconvenient obstacle to be removed from her path to supposed happiness. I've replayed our conversation countless times in my head, wondering if there was another way I could have approached it. If there were magic words that would have made her hear me, really hear me, instead of immediately going on the defensive. But I'm not sure such words exist. When someone is committed to a narrative, especially one that forms the foundation of the future they've imagined for themselves, contradicting evidence is rarely welcome. Last weekend I ran into our mutual friend at the farmer's market. We chatted awkwardly about neutral topics until finally, she sighed and pulled me aside. "She's not okay," she admitted in a low voice. They had another huge fight the day after they signed the purchase agreement. Apparently, he freaked out about the financial commitment and said some pretty harsh things about feeling trapped. My heart sank. What happened? She threatened to break up with him if he backed out of the house purchase. Said she'd tell everyone it was because he cheated, ruin his reputation. And he just gave in. Again. I felt physically ill hearing this. The emotional manipulation had escalated beyond anything I'd imagined. This wasn't just a misguided relationship anymore. It was becoming actively toxic. "I shouldn't be telling you this," our friend continued, looking around nervously as if my former friend might materialize beside us. "But I'm worried too. I just don't have your courage to say it to her face." Courage. Was that what it was? Or just foolish self-righteousness? The line between the two feels impossibly thin some days. I've started seeing a therapist to process my feelings about the whole situation. The loss of a friendship that I valued so deeply. The helplessness of watching someone I care about make decisions that seem destined to bring pain. The pattern became painfully predictable. They'd have an explosive fight, nearly break up, then reconcile with grand gestures and renewed promises. The reconciliation periods grew shorter while the fights became more intense. The guilt of wondering if I overstepped, if I should have minded my own business after all. My therapist suggested that perhaps my friend wasn't ready to hear the truth yet. That sometimes people need to learn lessons in their own time, in their own way. That I had planted a seed that might not germinate immediately, but could take root later when she's more receptive. It's a comforting thought, but it doesn't ease the immediate pain of her absence, or the anxiety I feel knowing what's unfolding behind the perfectly curated social media posts and enthusiastic wedding planning updates. Yesterday, I drafted a message to her. Not an apology. I still believe I did the right thing by speaking up, but a peace offering. A reminder that I'm still here, that I still care, that my door remains open whenever she needs it. I haven't sent it yet. I'm not sure if it would help or just make things worse right now. The hardest part is knowing that when this relationship implodes, she'll need support more than ever. But will she be able to turn to me, the friend who predicted it? Or will pride keep her away, prevent her from admitting that maybe, just maybe, I saw something she couldn't or wouldn't see? I've asked myself repeatedly if I would make the same choice again, knowing the cost. And despite everything, the lost friendship, the social fallout, the sleepless nights, my answer remains yes. Because true friendship isn't always about saying what someone wants to hear. Sometimes it's about saying what they need to hear, even when it costs you everything. Does that make me the asshole in this story? Maybe. Sometimes being right doesn't make you right. Sometimes the truth, however necessary, isn't welcome. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is also the thing they'll hate you for. All I know for certain is that I acted out of love, not malice. Out of concern, not jealousy. If that makes me the villain in her story, so be it. I have to live with my choices just as she must live with hers. I watched my vibrant, confident friend slowly transform into someone who constantly checked her phone, who apologized for having opinions, who measured her worth through his validation. Still, I kept my concerns to myself. The house closing is set for 3 weeks from now. The wedding dress has been purchased. The invitations are being printed. And I'm left watching from the sidelines as the train continues barreling down the tracks, destination unknown. I just hope that when it inevitably derails, there's someone there to help pick up the pieces. Even if it can't be me. I never expected to be writing this update, but life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. 3 days before they were scheduled to close on the house, he finally found the courage that had eluded him for months. He broke off the engagement. From what I've heard, it was messy, painful, and absolutely necessary. The news reached me through our mutual friend, who called in tears to tell me. Apparently, after signing the final pre-closing documents, reality hit him like a tsunami. He drove straight from the bank to his parents' house and broke down, confessing everything. The pressure, the manipulation, his deep certainty that he was making a catastrophic mistake. His parents, to their eternal credit, didn't force him to man up or honor his commitments. Instead, they listened, then helped him find a lawyer who specializes in real estate contracts. They lost the earnest money on the house purchase, but compared to the alternative, decades of unhappiness or a costly divorce down the line, it was a small price to pay. I didn't reach out to my friend immediately when I heard the news. I wanted to give her space to process the shock and heartbreak without the complication of our unresolved tension. But about a week after the breakup, I received a text from her at 2 a.m. You were right. About everything. I hate that you were right. But I hate more that I couldn't see it myself. We met for coffee the next day. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a brittleness to her movements that spoke of sleepless nights and endless crying. What right did I have to question her relationship? Love is complicated, I told myself. No one knows what happens behind closed doors. Maybe they were working through their issues. Maybe this was just a rough patch. But there was something else there too. A clarity that had been missing for months, maybe even years. I don't even know where to start, she said after we'd settled at a corner table, far from curious ears. With an apology, I guess. For how I treated you. For what I said. I shook my head. You don't need to apologize. You were protecting something you thought you wanted. That's just it, she said, staring into her untouched coffee. I didn't want him. Not really. I wanted what he represented. Stability. A clear path forward. Not being the only single one in our friend group. She laughed bitterly. God, it sounds so pathetic when I say it out loud. It's not pathetic, I assured her. It's human. We all want certainty, especially when everything else feels chaotic. She wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her obvious efforts to maintain composure. When he left, my first feeling wasn't even sadness. It was panic. Pure terror about what people would think. About having to tell everyone the wedding was off. About being alone again. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clearer than I'd seen them in ages. That's when I knew you were right. A relationship should be about the person, not the status they provide. We talked for hours that day. About everything and nothing. About how she'd lost herself in the relationship. About the red flags she'd ignored. About the future she thought she wanted versus the one she actually needed. It wasn't all healed in that one conversation. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But it was a start. The months since then haven't been easy for her. She's had to face questions from well-meaning family members, navigate the awkwardness of returning engagement gifts, deal with the financial fallout of the canceled house purchase. She started therapy, which has been helping her understand the patterns that led her to that relationship, and desperation that made her cling to it long past its expiration date. As for our friendship, we're rebuilding slowly. Maybe I was being overprotective and judgmental. Then came the decision to move in together after only 7 months of dating. When she told me, alarm bells rang in my head. But I smiled and helped her pack her things. There are still moments of tension, echoes of hurt feelings on both sides. But there's also a new honesty between us. A deeper understanding that sometimes the hardest conversations are the most necessary ones. She's taking time to be intentionally single now, reconnecting with herself and her own goals, outside of anyone else's expectations. Just last week, she applied for a study abroad program she'd always dreamed of but had abandoned when it didn't fit with their plans. I've learned lessons too. About the courage it takes to speak difficult truths. About the line between helpful intervention and harmful interference. About how sometimes being a good friend means risking the friendship itself. Would I do it all again, knowing the pain it would cause us both? Yes, without hesitation. Because true friendship isn't about keeping the peace at all costs. It's about caring enough to wade into the messy, uncomfortable spaces where growth happens. It's about holding up a mirror when someone has lost sight of themselves. It's about loving someone enough to tell them the truth, even when the truth isn't what they want to hear. So no, I don't think I was the asshole for intervening. I think I was being the friend she needed, even when she couldn't recognize it. Even when it broke both our hearts in the process. Sometimes the right thing and the easy thing are miles apart. And in the space between them lies the true measure of friendship. It's just practical, she insisted. We're spending every night together anyway, and we'll save so much on rent. I nodded, ignoring the voice in my head screaming that practicality rarely makes for a solid foundation when the emotional aspects of a relationship are already showing wear. I held my tongue when she complained about his messiness, his gaming habits that kept him up until 4 a.m., his reluctance to introduce her to his family. I bit back my concerns when she mentioned that they hadn't discussed future goals or how they'd handle finances. I watched silently as she gradually took on more and more responsibility in their shared apartment, cleaning, cooking, managing bills, while resentment visibly built behind her forced smiles. This wasn't the equal partnership she deserved. This wasn't even the relationship she described wanting countless times during our late-night talks. But she seemed determined to make it work, and I was determined to support her choices, however misguided they seemed to me. Looking back now, I wonder if my silence made me complicit in what was to come. If I had spoken up sooner, could I have prevented the engagement that now threatens to chain two clearly incompatible people together for life? There's no way to know. All I can do now is face the mess before me and decide whether true friendship sometimes means being the bearer of painful truths. The engagement announcement came via a group text on a random Tuesday afternoon. A close-up photo of her hand, sporting a modest ring, accompanied by the words, "He finally asked, wedding planning mode activated." I stared at my phone for a full 5 minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. They'd only been together for barely over a year, and most of that time had been tumultuous at best. Just the weekend before, she'd been at my apartment, in tears after another one of their fights, one where he'd accused her of being too needy and suffocating him. Now they were engaged. Our friend group chat exploded with congratulatory messages and ring emoji, but I noticed an undercurrent of confusion in the private messages that soon lit up my phone. Did you know this was happening? Aren't they like, constantly fighting? Is she pregnant? I forced myself to send a congratulatory text while trying to quell the sick feeling in my stomach. Something felt deeply wrong about this, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. Was I just being judgmental? Was I secretly jealous that she had found someone to commit to her while I remained single? I spent hours interrogating my own motives, wondering if my hesitation came from a place of genuine concern or something less admirable. We met for coffee the next day, and she was buzzing with excitement, showing me Pinterest boards she'd apparently been curating for months. Wedding venues, dress ideas, color schemes. She had it all planned out in meticulous detail. But when I gently asked about the proposal itself, her energy shifted subtly. Well, she said, stirring her latte with unusual focus, it wasn't exactly a surprise. We'd been talking about our future, and I just told him I thought it was time we got engaged if this relationship was going anywhere. He agreed it made sense. No romantic gesture, no getting down on one knee, no heartfelt declaration of love or desire to spend their lives together. Just pragmatism, a checkbox on a relationship timeline that she had determined they needed to check. More concerning was what she revealed next, in a moment of rare vulnerability. She admitted that he had initially hesitated, saying he wasn't sure if they were ready, that he had concerns about their compatibility long-term, that he wanted more time to be certain. But I told him that's just pre-commitment jitters, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. Everyone gets nervous about big steps. I told him we're perfect together, and he'd regret it if he let me go. I felt a chill run through me at her words. Had she pressured him into proposing? Had she given him an ultimatum? The engagement suddenly took on a different light. Less a mutual decision born of love, more a strategic move in a relationship power struggle. Over the next few weeks, I watched them closely at group gatherings. While she was effervescent with wedding talk, he seemed subdued, almost resigned. He'd plaster on a smile when people asked about wedding plans, but would quickly change the subject. When she wasn't looking, I caught him staring into the distance with an expression that could only be described as trapped. Then came the breaking point. At a small dinner party at my apartment, he had a few too many drinks and stepped outside for some air. I followed to check on him, concerned about his increasing alcohol consumption lately. On my balcony, away from the others, his carefully maintained facade crumbled. I don't know if I can go through with this, he confessed, not looking at me. I care about her, but... He trailed off, shaking his head. She just wouldn't stop talking about marriage. Said if I really loved her, I'd want to commit. That if I didn't propose soon, she'd know I was just wasting her time. My heart sank as he continued, confirming my worst suspicions. I'm only 23. I haven't even figured out my career yet. But she made it clear, either propose or she's gone. And I panicked. I didn't want to lose her. When I asked if he'd shared these feelings with her, he laughed bitterly. You know her. Once she sets her mind on something, there's no talking her out of it. And now everyone's congratulating us, and her parents have already started putting money aside for the wedding, and I feel like I'm watching my life spiral out of control. I promised him I wouldn't say anything, a promise I've kept until now. But his confession haunted me. A marriage built on ultimatums and fear of loneliness isn't a marriage at all. It's a prison for both people involved. The final piece of the puzzle came a week later when my friend drunkenly admitted to our mutual friend that she's only with him because being single terrifies me more than being in a bad relationship. Our mutual friend told me this in strict confidence, but those words changed everything for me. They confirmed that neither of them was entering this marriage for the right reasons. He out of coercion, she out of fear of being alone. What began as concern transformed into moral certainty. This engagement needed to end before it destroyed both their lives. But who was I to make that call? And even if I was right, did I have the right to interfere? I thought the engagement was the apex of their misguided relationship decisions. I was wrong. Just as our friend group was processing the engagement bombshell, My friend casually mentioned during brunch that they had toured several houses the previous weekend. We found this adorable 3-bedroom in the suburbs, she gushed, scrolling through photos on her phone. It needs some work, but it has so much potential. And with interest rates going up, we figured we should lock something down now. My fork clattered against my plate. You're buying a house? Together? Before the wedding. She nodded enthusiastically, completely missing my horror. We're pre-approved for a mortgage. His parents are helping with a down payment as an early wedding gift. I tried to keep my voice level as I asked about logistics, whose name would be on the deed, if they'd consulted a lawyer about co-ownership before marriage, what their plan was if something went wrong. Her answers were vague and dismissive. They hadn't thought about those details. They were in love, and that was all that mattered. All I could think about was a cousin who had bought a house with her boyfriend of 5 years, only to have the relationship implode 6 months later. The legal and financial nightmare that followed had taken nearly 2 years to untangle. And that was a relationship everyone had thought was rock solid. This felt like watching someone walk straight toward a cliff edge while insisting the ground continued indefinitely. The engagement was concerning enough. An emotional commitment that would be painful but ultimately possible to sever, if necessary. A house, though. That was a legal and financial entanglement that could keep them bound together long after the relationship had died. I left that brunch physically nauseated from anxiety. On my way home, I called my sister, who works in real estate, and described the situation in hypothetical terms. Her reaction confirmed my fears. That's absolutely insane, she said bluntly. Buying property with someone you're not married to is risky enough when the relationship is stable. But if there are already problems, and they're this young, this has disaster written all over it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining my friend 5 years from now, legally tied to someone she no longer loves through a mortgage neither could afford to buy the other out of, possibly with children involved by then, making the situation exponentially more complicated. I thought about him too, essentially trapped in a life he'd been pressured into, growing more resentful by the day. The next morning, I confided in a trusted coworker during our coffee break. Dao. I explained the situation, my concerns, and my growing conviction that I needed to intervene somehow. Their response caught me off guard. Honestly? You'd be an asshole for interfering, they said matter-of-factly. It's her life. Her mistake to make. You say your piece once, gently, and then you step back. Anything more than that, and you're overstepping. Their words stung, partly because I recognized the truth in them. Who was I to decide what was best for someone else's life? What made me so certain I knew better than my friend what would make her happy? And yet, isn't that what friendship sometimes requires? The courage to speak difficult truths when someone you care about is heading for pain. I spent the next several days in agonizing indecision. Every time my phone lit up with a text from her about wedding plans or house hunting updates, my stomach knotted. I drafted and deleted countless messages, trying to find the right words to express my concerns, without seeming judgmental or controlling. What made the situation even more complex was that I genuinely care about both of them. This isn't just about saving my friend from heartache. It's about preventing two good people from making a mistake that could define the next decade of their lives. A mistake born not of love, but of fear, pressure, and misguided ideas about what relationships should look like. As their house search intensified, so did the visible strain between them. At a small get-together last weekend, they spent most of the evening on opposite sides of the room. When the topic of the house came up, he would defer to her with a detached whatever she wants, while she spoke over him with increasingly frantic enthusiasm, as if she could compensate for his obvious disinterest with her own excess energy. When someone innocently asked, "Aren't you excited to start your lives together?" His response was telling, a long pause, followed by a forced smile. And yeah, it's all happening pretty fast. The look my friend shot him could have frozen lava. Later that night, I overheard them arguing in hushed, tense voices in the kitchen. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," she hissed. "Why can't you just pretend to be happy about this? Because I'm not sure about any of it." He replied, his voice strained. "The house, the wedding, it's all too much, too fast. I feel like I can't breathe." "Well, figure it out," she snapped. "Because I'm not going to be a sad, pathetic girl whose fiancé got cold feet. I slipped away before they realized I had heard, but those words echoed in my head for days afterward. This wasn't about building a life together anymore, if it ever had been. It was about appearances, about her fear of embarrassment and abandonment, about his fear of confrontation and hurting her. And now, as I write this, they have a house viewing scheduled for tomorrow. A viewing for a property they can barely afford, in a relationship that's visibly crumbling, with a wedding date already set for next spring. I've made my decision. Tonight, I'm going to talk to her. I've invited her over, just the two of us, to have an honest conversation. I'm going to risk our friendship to tell her what I've observed, what I've heard, and why I believe she's making a catastrophic mistake. Not because I think I know better, but because I love her too much to stay silent while she chains herself to unhappiness out of fear. I spent hours preparing for our conversation. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, bought her favorite wine, and even made those chocolate chip cookies she loves. Pathetic attempts to soften the blow I was about to deliver, I know. But I needed to do something with my hands while rehearsing what to say. How do you tell someone you love that they're making a terrible mistake? That the future they're so desperately clinging to is built on manipulation and fear, rather than love? That you've seen behind the curtain and know their relationship isn't what they pretend it is? I decided on directness, wrapped in as much compassion as I could muster. No accusations. No, I told you so. Just honest observations and open questions that might help her see what seemed so glaringly obvious to everyone else. When she arrived, we went through the motions of normal conversation for a while. Work updates, family gossip, the newest show we'd both been watching. But the elephant in the room grew larger with each passing minute. And finally, after our second glass of wine, I took a deep breath and plunged in. I need to talk to you about something difficult, I began, my voice already unsteady. And I need you to know that I'm saying this because I care about you more than I care about you being temporarily happy with me. Her expression shifted immediately, wariness replacing the relaxed smile she'd been wearing. She didn't speak, just waited, her posture stiffening slightly. I'm worried about you and this engagement, I continued, and especially about you buying a house together right now. The silence that followed felt eternal. Her face cycled through emotions: surprise, confusion, hurt, and finally, a hardening that made my stomach clench. You're worried, she repeated flatly, about my engagement to the man I love, the man I'm going to spend my life with. I nodded, pushing through despite the warning signs. I am, because I've seen how unhappy you both seem lately. Because I have heard things that make me think neither of you is entering this marriage for the right reasons. What things? She demanded. What could you possibly know about our relationship? This was the moment of no return.